let me introduce my guests, my other guest in the studio now, Dayo Fagbolu. It's nice to have you join me right now.
It's a pleasure.
I know you've been following this development of the election so far. If you watch the build up to the election, where it seemed there was going to be war or there's going to be burning in Edo State, but on the day of election, everything seemed calm relatively against the initial thought. But what concerns do you have, and what commendations so far? What's your observation so far?
Well, I guess the concerns we had initially was violence, basically, because I mean, if you check out all the statements that have been made over the months and the passing months, there's a consistency. I mean, the main issue was violence, election rigging, and stuff like that. So I mean, now that this is not happening, I mean, it's quite exciting for me. I've never seen an election so peaceful. Everything seems to be in order, and I guess
especially
that's what we want.
in Edo State.
Yes, right. You're right. Of course, I mean, one shouldn't say that. I mean, what I mean by that is they have a culture also which tends towards exhibiting some degree of violence as resistance to authority of some sort. But I guess the state has matured. I mean, over the years, between Oshiomhole and Obaseki, there seems to have been a refinement of the process. The electorate has matured. So I guess now they're really addressing issues.
Yeah, but we know Edo people to be very politically enlightened people. And in that, they exhibit and monitor what they're doing. And
Yes.
they want what they want, you know, to be what's on the table.
Look, I wouldn't put it that way without being, too antagonistic. You see, they're caught up in a crossfire. First is the economic power which is embedded in that state. It has been poor over the years. I mean, this turn of events is just in the last few years between Oshiomhole and Godwin Obaseki. So, I mean, the bottom line is, apart from, you know, the moral issues, the ethical issues, and they react to them. So it's not about the enlightenment alone. It's about how the economic indices drive their attitudes towards voting.
All right. So what do you think are the issues in this election? The point there is the build up to the election didn't see, for those who have been watching, didn't see more of discussion of the issues. It was the campaigning didn't talk much about the issues. But from the minds of the people, from your observation, what do you think the issues are in this election that might impact the voting pattern?
Well, for starters, it's culture. It's a loyalty to a group of people. That's the first thing. The second thing is economics, as in social, political, cultural, social economics. I think the bottom line is this. People want a better life. They've had hard times in that state. It's been a state driven by a lot of poverty. And all of a sudden, they are now caught up in a crossfire of leaders that have the capacity, or seem to have the capacity, to change their dynamics. I mean, between Oshiomhole and Obaseki, like I said, we have seen, I mean, he's employing Obaseki for starters. Oshiomhole employed Obaseki to deal with his economics, to deal with his finances, to deal with progress in that department. So we see professionals coming in. So the question really now is, it wasn't between an ordinary politician who didn't know or a politician who knows. The issues now are, it's between politicians that have an idea of what needs to be done. And that's what the issue is in Edo State now. People will have to decide on, let's call it their conscience. Okay. Right, it's a conscience thing. I mean, you could give them money now in Edo State and they will react differently. So it's a conscience vote now. It's a question of who will deliver. Okay. And as far as I'm concerned, we have Obaseki there who has shown some pedigree in terms of delivery, who shows that he knows what to do. Of course, he's been accused of a lot
of things.
Yes, but the point is, he knows what to do to move the state forward. All right. It's undisputable.
Let's leave all of that to Edo people to decide.
Yes, I will.
The way they want, so that we don't. But however, let's get to the issue of a permanent voter register and all of that. About from the statistics we have, about 2.2 million people are registered to vote here, and 1.7 million collected their PVCs, leaving about 483,000 people who did not collect PVCs. That is in the books. Now, if you translate that to the field, we may not have up to, it may not be exactly the numbers and all of that, but very good. You can see the statistics on air now for those who are home to follow the breakdown in the senatorial districts, you know, and all of that, jiggling the numbers here and there. But if we have about close to 500,000 people who didn't collect PVCs, how do you think this is going to impact the process generally when we talk about voter apathy on one hand, or people becoming more enlightened and wanting to take, you know, destinies in their hands or being partakers in the process?
Now, the problem with commenting on this issue is that we don't have any demographics. I mean, is it an age thing? I mean, if it's the elderly, for instance, that haven't picked up their PVCs, we can understand that it doesn't necessarily change the outcome in totality. It's the youth that I'm concerned about. If 90% of those votes, or maybe like 75% of those votes that haven't picked up the PVCs are young people, then that could be a problem. But if it's the elderly, it makes no difference.
We have a breakdown of the statistics earlier on based on the age, and my producers will put that on shortly, because from the statistics we got, we have more than 50% of young people who collected their
that is
PVCs
a problem.
And all of that. We have at least a little above 50%.
Yeah.
And then the old, like you mentioned, is just around 4%.
Well, that's the point. Now, listen, they are slightly insignificant. I mean, they're probably less agile, less aggressive about the issues. It's the youth that need to change the dynamics. Okay. So once they pick up their cards, then we'll have a fairly, stable outcome. They are the ones that drive the economy now. They are the ones that the future is invested in. So yes, I mean, it's good enough as far as I'm concerned.
All right. Now, this is the first governorship election since the pandemic.
Right.
And it is normal to see that the protocols are going to change. It's not just going to be exactly the way people used to go there, cast your ballot and leave.
Yes.
The issues of face masks wearing and social or physical distancing and points where people can wash their hands or have access to hand sanitizers and all of that. But we see that it's a mixed bag of here and there. People not adhering to some of those protocols, flouting the rules and all of that. What concern do you have there?
Look, there is a concern, like I said, but it's not unexpected. I would expect that the political parties themselves, I mean, if you want to bring people out to vote, should have some kind of social contribution. I mean, put these things in place in your own wards. There are nearly 200 wards in Edo State. I mean, provide these things. They don't cost very much. The political parties should show some social responsibility in doing these things, because a lot of people can't afford them. I mean, the generality of the people in that state can barely afford these things. So I would expect the political parties who are interested in their people, who are interested in delivering service to these people, to show some commitment to it. That's how I see it. It's their responsibility, because they already know the state of their people. They know the strength of their people financially. They should deal with these issues for them.
How about the issue of enlightenment on the part of the people? Because if they're enlightened enough, it reduces the burden of compliance.
Look, no matter how enlightened you are, there's an issue of your capacity, your capability, in terms of economic capabilities. Look, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. I've lived in that state, you know, for a couple of years, and one has watched the state evolve. There are still certain areas, very rural areas, and you find out that at least 30% of Edo State is rural. At least 30% of it is, I mean, one could term them as being rural. Now, these people, of course, even though they're enlightened to some degree, the question is, can they afford to do these things for themselves? And you see, like I said, this is what government does. This is what the political parties, to show that they're committed to these people, their safety, their health, and their future, they should make these things available. That's my view.
Okay. Well, you can see live visuals from one of the polling units in there, and it seemed to be calm and peaceful. If you see people also around, you can see some have their face masks, others don't, but the more challenging thing there is the social or physical distancing there, which has not been complied to in total. But you see people, especially the officials there, all have their face masks on. Wearing it properly is another thing altogether anyway. Right. But you can see there's level of compliance, and people, even the aged, are there wanting to be part of the process in there, being assisted to help cast their ballot. This is in Edo South, and it's really interesting, people wanting to be part of that process. Now, Dayo, let me come back to you in here. Let's talk about the issue of security. Right. Now, the police, Inspector General of Police told us about 31,000 police officers have been deployed for this election in Edo State. And one of the reports we got earlier on from Ikpaboha, one of the local governments within Benin City, that one person had been shot. We are still waiting to get the details of all of that as to what happened and so on. But the presence of security officials, because every time we're preparing for elections, not just this one, it seems like there's war, there's going to be war and all of that, from the rhetorics and the warnings and the riot act reading and so on. But the presence of heavy security, is it meant to create some level of safety and confidence on the part of from the people, or it creates some level of scare? What do you see?
I think it's a bit of both.
Okay.
You know, one of the issues we've always discussed is how the community relationships with the police, you know, how the police interact with their communities. But relatively, in this particular case, I think the police being there is sending a message home that, you know what, gentlemen, we need to do this thing as peacefully as possible. We already know what the issues are. So let's just get it done peacefully. I think in this case, it says to the people, you know, I mean, we're here to enforce the peace. That's what it says in this instance. There'll be one or two discrepancies, one or two rare occasions, like you've said, but it's not going to be the norm. It's obvious from everything we've seen that, I mean, they are determined to engage in a peaceful process. So that's my view.
Do you think that INEC and the authorities should begin to experiment with, let's reduce the number of police officers for elections sometime. Let's see how the people conduct themselves. Do you think they should be experimenting in that regard?
I don't think so. But I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Look, to take any decision, you need an array of assumptions. And one of the assumptions, like I said to you, is the culture you're dealing with. What are their values? You know, what are their practices? And in all honesty, as Africans, as Nigerians, you know, as Edo people, they're relatively aggressive people. They make statements with intensity. So when it comes to an election, I would suggest, for starters,
I wouldn't see Edo people as aggressive.
No,
I'll see them as...
Don't misunderstand me.
Okay.
The term is not in a negative sense. Right. I'm speaking in a positive sense here, that there's a determination to get what they want, to get results. Now, in that case, of course, it pushes the boundaries just a little bit. I'm saying that, look, we don't want to experiment. We can take the experiment into other things at other times. But at this moment in time, based on the assumptions and the cultures that we have observed, there is a need for the government to show that we have a solid interest in this state and we want things done properly. And that's what the police presence is for, really. To say, gentlemen, it has to be done properly. And I think that's the right thing to do at this moment. The experiments we can try later.
But not for now.
Not for now, no.
Okay. Let's talk about women participation here.
Yes.
Amongst the 14 candidates, only 2 women are standing as candidates. But beyond that, if you go to the queuing up of those who are going to vote, we have a significant number of women. In fact, in some places, we have more women casting the vote than the men. Yeah. But talk to us, are the women really ready? Or if you flip the coin, we're supposed to encourage them by, you know, giving some specific areas to women. Okay, let the women take this or take that as a way of encouraging them. What do you think?
Having that conversation with me, I have a bias.
Okay.
And it's nice that I explain this. You see, I believe in equality. I believe in leveling the playing field. But having said this, I also believe that you do not downplay the role of men to amplify the role of women. They should all be given equal opportunities on an equal platform. If the women step up, I'm thrilled about it. If they choose not to step up, I'm also thrilled about it. In taking the decision of who will lead them is where my concern really is. Right. I mean, and we can see them, they're stepping out in large numbers. the young and the elderly. And really, that is what I think women should do. Determine who sets the pace. I mean, if they think a woman is an appropriate leader and she competes effectively with the men and she's elected, you know, to run for office, I think it's all right. It's giving people undue advantage over others. Because to give somebody an advantage, what you have done is you have put somebody else at a disadvantage. Now, if we talk about equity, it has to be equity across board. It's not a feminine thing, it's not a masculine thing. Everybody needs to come in and vie for these positions equally.
So there shouldn't be that dichotomy between men, women per se. It should just be everyone who is eligible, just be there.
Precisely.
If you have your PVC and you have what it takes, you're from the place, you're an indigent, and all of that, then just go.
That's my point.
There shouldn't be that.
See, yeah, I've heard all kinds of arguments where people say, you know, look, listen, let's give them more opportunities. Women have, I might have kids, and my kids have all the opportunities all the guys have. So the question of equality doesn't arise. The truth about it is you don't put somebody at a disadvantage to put somebody else at an advantage. Okay. What they should all do is level playing field, everybody please go. What I would resist is if you put women under intentionally, if you subjugate them. Now, but this is not the case. I mean, they've given an open field, let them all step out and let them run. Equally, let them vote, let them decide their futures. And as far as I'm concerned, what I see today is the equivalent of people have been given equal opportunities.
All right.
Well, there might be a part I don't know, sorry.
Right. But from what we know so far.
Yes, it's a fair.
All right. Now, top of the hour will be time for the news update, and then we come back to dwell on all of these. But we're still talking with Dayo Fagbulu here in the studio on the election process so far, what is going on in Edo State. And many of the candidates have cast their ballots from the reports we're getting and receiving. And a lot of them express level of satisfaction with the process so far, if things remain this way. Now, let's talk about the issue of INEC. Let's focus on INEC now, because INEC will be very busy today. Today is their day. Kind of, exactly. But when INEC initially talked about the issue of we are ready for this election, which everyone has confidence in, number two is the issue of the capacity to prosecute those who are seen as election offenders, as the case may be. Right. Now, let's talk from that window. This thing has been on for so many years now. We don't often see those who perpetrated any violence during the election being prosecuted. Right. Are you seeing? Are you likely to see something different from this? If there is,
I think for starters, in this particular election, a lot of sincere warnings have gone out. Okay. I mean, the president has spoken. You have seen other leaders. You've seen Tinubu. You've seen Oshiomhole. I mean, mixed statements. I mean Kumsi Kumsa with a bit of both, either taking sides or expressing a need to have things done properly. So in this case now, all the resources are concentrated on Edo State. That means all the resources that would have been concentrated on 36 states are now concentrated on Edo State. I mean, they have shown their interest. All the leaders of the political parties have shown a sincere interest in Edo State. They have spoken out. So I really think, for starters, they're going to have a decreased ratio of incidents for starters. And in this case, if anybody crosses the line...
Okay. So we look forward to changing that narrative when it comes to building more capacity.
With this state.
Exactly, with this state, because it's experimental. Because since the pandemic, this is the first governorship election. Right. Exactly. And just in about a month, or less than a month, we'll be seeing another one in Ondo State before a few other staggered elections before 2023, as it is. Now, one other issue I'd like us to talk about. I'm told we have to wrap it up here because of time. We're trying to manage time here and there. Dayo Fagbulu, thank you so much for your time on the program.
It's a pleasure.
And like you say, or as you have said, we look forward to a peaceful, fair, and credible election in Edo State. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.